Hello, everyone. My name is Paul from the New News, and welcome back to yet another day regarding the global news. It's Friday. You guys have officially made it to the weekend. Congratulations. I know I'm sure happy it's the weekend. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. I've added an additional color because just for my sanity, I sometimes kind of forget where the good news of the day is. So you're going to start seeing some purple dots pop up here every once in a while, and that is going to be the good news of the day, essentially. And that's normally stuff we cover at the end because most of the news is kind of depressing, honestly. There's a lot of stuff that just isn't very good in the world right now. You got the war in Ukraine, you have, stuff going on with the Islamic State, you have natural disasters going on. I mean, droughts, famine, uh, hurricanes, typhoons, landslides, torrential rains. And we are still looking for more additional ways to help people. But if you do check out in the description below, we do have a bunch of different organizations that we've gone through and we have vetted. And so not only can we deliver the news to you, but we can be the community. We can be the news that gives back. And it takes community support. The only way we're able to do this is with your help. And we appreciate the support that you've already given up until this point. We know there's been a lot of it, but we want to be able to do more. So if you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all, trust me, I understand. But give us a like and subscribe. Let your friends know about us, because the more people that come here, the more help we can give other people throughout the world. So without further ado, we're going to get right into the news today. And we're actually going to start in Lviv. And as you can see, there's a paw print. And when there's a paw print, there's normally a Patron. And Patron actually visited a children's hospital. So the June the 1st not only is that the beginning of Pride Month, but it's also the beginning of, that is the International Children's Day. So Patron went to Lviv and he had a celebration where we actually talked about it because we thought originally it was in Kyiv. We didn't have a location for it originally, but it was in Lviv, and those were all children shouting his name. We are now all part of the cult of Patron. And we also see that he also visited a children's hospital. And these are children who were wounded throughout the war thus far. Some of them have amputations. Some of them have, broken bones, shrapnel. A lot of them have gone through some very horrible things. Some of them possibly even from Mariupol. But this is at the St. Mykola hospital here in Lviv. And he is just an adorable thing. I mean, look at him. How can you not love Patron? He's wearing his vest. You can see the handle there where I always talk about. You can pick him up. Now, he has a bullet on the side of him. Patron actually in Ukrainian means cartridge. So that's why earlier when we first started talking about Patron, his nickname, or we called him Cartridge, because that is the English translation. But there he is in all of his glory. He's just such a good boy. He's such a good boy. I can't describe how good of a boy he is. You see, he's just having the time of his life. His tail's wagging. It's so fast, it's blurring the camera. I mean, and it just brings joy to everybody. How could it not? And there he is with all those wounded children. So, while there is some very dark things that are going on in the war, there is some things that are our silver lining, and it's stuff like that. There are several announcements today out of Kyiv's government, and this is a couple of, we normally do these individually, but there's a lot of stuff coming out of Kyiv specifically, and it's kind of a big day for their government right now. It was, because we're currently now, it's after midnight, and it's day 101 in Ukraine. But they said but this is coming from Kirilo. I'm sorry if I mess this up, but Kirilo Timoshenko, the deputy head of the president's office, and he stated that as of June the 3rd, the armed forces of Ukraine have liberated 1,017 Ukrainian settlements from Russian occupiers, meaning that they have so far liberated 1,017 different villages and towns and cities that were invaded and occupied by Russian forces. This is coming from the regional police chief of Ukraine, or of the Kyiv region specifically, Andriy Nibitov. and he said that as of June the 3rd, 1,314 dead bodies of Ukrainian civilians killed by Russian occupiers have been found in the Kyiv region. Now, there hasn't been nearly as much focus after the initial shock of what happened when it comes to the Kyiv region, and as such, there hasn't been nearly as much news. But what ended up but the recovery efforts are still ongoing. I mean, you're talking about places like Kalinivka, Borodyanka, Bucha, Irpin, Hostomel, all the way up to places such as like Chernobyl. I mean, everywhere along this entire region that was occupied by Russian forces, they're still going through. They're still finding the dead. They're still finding mass graves. They're still finding all sorts of things that happen. Luckily, as we've already aired here on the channel, even some CCTV camera footage has survived, and it's shown very much, in fact, that Russian forces were committing atrocities up in this region. And as we move on, we have two separate quotes here from the Prosecutor General's Office of Ukraine. And the first quote is, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, 261 children have died and 463 children have been injured. Most victims among children are from the Donetsk region." And the second quote is, "Since the beginning of Russia's full-scale war against Ukraine, Russian troops have committed 22,678 crimes against Ukraine and its citizens." What the Ukraine Prosecutor General's office is saying here is she's saying that these are 22,678 war crimes. Now, we get footage, about some of these, obviously. A lot of these get videotaped. And being an attorney, she's going to know international law a little bit more than I am. Even though I am, I do have an understanding of it from just a military background. I got to know what I need to not do. There's a lot of specifics, and she's going to know all of those, and that's a lot. That's an insane amount of war crimes that have been committed. And all of this is getting submitted. They're taking evidence from all of these that they're able to, and they're submitting it to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. So all of this stuff is just immediately getting... And we've shown you some of these boxes where they submitted the first 9,000 reports to The Hague. And it's just boxes and boxes and boxes of evidence and reports and files and paperwork and everything else. It is insane. However, as I said, this marks 100 days of successful fighting in Ukraine. This is officially day 100. Now, you may notice that there is a little bit of a gap. When we had those days, when we took those extended days off, we actually ended up miscounting here on the channel. That's a fault of mine. But we actually were a day behind when we were numbering these. We were still keeping up with the news. We were just a day behind with when we numbered them. I just misnumbered everything. So I have corrected that with today. This is officially day 100. And today is, like I said, it's day 100. It's very important. It's very symbolic. I mean, 100 days of continuous fighting since February the 24th. And just like for the United States, for instance, the first 100 days of a president's term is considered a major milestone. It's very similar when you're talking about a war, especially one that's been this brutal, this extensive, and we've seen the combat. We've seen the raw footage. President Zelensky made an announcement today and made a video today that you may find a little reminiscent. So let's take a look. And this is coming from The Guardian. They pulled this, so this was just the easiest one for us to pull. This is everywhere. Let's take a look. Sorry, I just realized that I didn't even have the news. I didn't even have the audio on for that, so I'm sorry about that. I'm gonna restart it.
Лідер фракції тут, голова Офісу Президента тут, прем'єр-міністр України Шмигаль тут, Подоляк тут, президент тут. Наша команда набагато більше. Збройні сили України тут. Найголовніше – наш народ, народ нашої держави тут. Захищаємо Україну вже 100 днів. Перемога за нами. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
Героям слава!
Now, some of you may find yourselves looking back and wondering, I've seen this before, and you have. As soon as this pulls up. This is day 2 of the war. This is after, Russia was saying President Zelensky had fled. The United States had said, hey, we can put a helicopter in there, pick you up, and you can run your country from afar in exile. And his famous words, I need ammo, not a ride. And this is essentially the exact same place, almost the exact same speech saying, I am still here after 100 days of war. That is a powerful message when you consider that Russia and really the entire rest of the world thought Ukraine would fall within hours or days. It's turned into months. Very well could turn into years. And they're not talking about just defending their country. They're talking about victory. Victory over Russia. So that is a very powerful message when you put it into those contexts. So that actually wraps up here up in Kyiv. And we can actually jump down here over into the Donbass and right here along the front lines. This is like a 500-mile long front line. It's a very large defensive line that they're having to hold, and the Russian forces are probing and trying to outmaneuver and outflank the Ukrainians at every turn they can along this entire front line. They have their focuses, though, and they're trying to encircle Severodonetsk continuously still, but they're not succeeding, so they've just decided that they're going to use what artillery they have, and they're going to be trying to cut off supplies, especially here over at Bakhmut, while they're continuing to attempt to push towards Bakhmut and actually try and take the city. But here in Severodonetsk, the battle line has not changed on this map, and I want to make that very clear because we do not have enough independent information to say it has. And so, with that, we have a couple of different things going on here. And the first thing is that the Foreign Legion is known to be operating right now in Severodonetsk, including the American Foreign Legion and the British and basically the English-speaking Foreign Legion, as well as other Foreign Legion members and groups. But this video was released today, but it was filmed several days ago at the outset of the Battle of Severodonetsk as they were pulling troops to reinforce this area as the battle grew more and more intense. But let's take a look here. They are literally jumping off the trucks, having some short interviews while they're pulling all the gear off, and they're literally going into the city. So we'll take a look.
I think it's fantastic. I think it's an opportunity. I think since coming here, it's been amazing how many people from all around the world have come together to help out a country in need. I feel like it's really, really inspirational to have a lot of these guys with previous experience to actually lend their hand, and step up and volunteer. So I'm from Australia. It's quite far away, quite hard to get here, and even I stepped up. So hopefully I inspire more people to come and do the same thing. Yeah.
Which country?
It's war for Georgians as well. I'm just a 22-year-old kid, and I feel that's the right thing to do. And we're gonna push Russians back. It's gonna take a day, month, or a year. It doesn't matters. We are on the right side of the history, so we're gonna make sure all of us are gonna get back home with their families
and we make sure that the occupants are not going to do the same.
And for context too, for a lot of the American viewers, when he said Georgia, he means the country of Georgia, not the state. So and that you could see the Georgian flag, the half Georgian flag on his patch there. So, but yeah, so the Foreign Legion's there. They're operating. They're fighting alongside regular Ukrainian forces. We've seen them get employed very, very well thus far. We know that another part of the Foreign Legion, the Free Russian Forces, they are also fighting on a separate part of the front down, probably closer a little bit to Popasna, though we can't be certain. We don't know exactly where they're at. We just know that they're kind of up in this region here in the Donetsk Luhansk region here. But that's just kind of where we're sitting. But bringing in these extra troops and bringing in, and we heard about a counterattack yesterday. And this counterattack was, they said that we weren't tactically withdrawing, we were outmaneuvering them, which didn't seem to make sense to anybody else, and it kind of seemed like propaganda when it was first put out, because Severodonetsk had fallen to 80%, which is what's reflected here on the map. But at least according to Sergei Gaida, who's the governor of the Luhansk region, has stated that Ukrainian forces have recaptured roughly 20% of Severodonetsk within the last 24 hours, which makes sense considering some of the footage that we aired yesterday where separatist forces were being captured and they were reportedly in a full rout. So this, we don't have enough independent footage or information to verify this. This, once again, could just be another statement trying to... I mean, you have to keep morale high, and if you're saying you're losing Severodonetsk, that's just not good. And I'm not going to lie to you on that either way. Information campaigns go both ways. Both Ukraine and Russia are both conducting information campaigns, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. And while we may have a very openly stated Ukrainian bias here, we still have to understand that that is indeed the situation. The information war is just as important as the war on the ground, because that is going to win or lose support worldwide and amongst your people, even more importantly. But reportedly 20% of Severodonetsk has been recaptured. That means that 60% of the city is in control. That roughly puts them a little bit further up here over by, like, say, Master here. And really puts them almost at a 50-50 if they were to push any further, which I'm sure they are if that's the case. But that would lend credibility to them outmaneuvering Russian forces and really baiting them to get deeper and deeper into urban combat, because that is literally the deadliest form of combat I think you could probably be in, is urban warfare, because there are so many places to take cover, to hide, to run to escape to you can do hit and runs, you can do literally anything. It's a sniper's wet dream, it's a machine gunner's wet dream, because all you have is enfilade fire. It is, and it's very difficult for vehicles and large groups of troops to move, so you have to be moving in smaller formations, which makes you an easier target. And vehicles are much easier targets, because all it takes is a dude with an RPG to pop out the alleyway, take the shot, and dive right back in, and you're never going to see him again. This is the problem for, say, the Battle of Fallujah, or the Battle for Baghdad, or during the operations in Kandahar, or name major urban city here. In fact, the Russians and the Soviets would have learned this at the Battle of Stalingrad too. So that is kind of where we're sitting in Severodonetsk, but until we get more information, we're just not going to change the battle line, because, once again, it's the information war, unfortunately, does go both ways. And as we drop down here and go along this front line, this is the kind of thing that myths are made of. You see these crazy actions in, say, like your video games or something, and you think, oh, well, war's not possibly, like stuff like this doesn't happen. And for the most part, you'd be right. Like it doesn't. Like, it's pretty bare bones basic when you're talking about warfare. But crazy stuff does happen. And this is the kind of thing we're talking about. So there's a firefight in this video going on. This is somewhere here in the Luhansk region. And there's a firefight that's ongoing. What ends up happening is this Ukrainian soldier, in the middle of this firefight, they ambushed basically a bunch of Russians. And one of them is a Russian T-80. And they didn't close their hatches because in case they got hit by a rocket, they want a quick escape because, I don't know, they're dumb, I guess. You're supposed to button up. And he jumps up onto the tank in the middle of this firefight, and he drops a hand grenade into the turret, and kills the crew. So we're going to take a look at this. This is some pretty crazy footage, so take a look.
Да, бегом! Мужики залеглись! Это свои! Уходим! Это свои или нет? Погнали! Свои! Бегом!
Pretty crazy, and you can see there's explosions and everything happening in the background. So this is a wider scale battle. This is a very small microcosm what's happening. Also, I believe I misspoke. They listed this as a T-80, but the stamped rotor wheel is telling me it's a T-64. So I'm sorry about that. But this guy literally climbs on top of the tank, tosses a hand grenade into the turret, kills the crew. Like, that's the kind of thing that you only see in, like, video games or movies. You never hear about that kind of stuff in real life, but it's rare, but moments like that happen. So they do happen, but like I said, that's the kind of thing myths are made out of. Like, this man's going to be a myth in his unit. Yuri over here just climbed on top of a tank and tossed a hand grenade into it and killed the crew and took it out of commission completely. And now they can capture it. It looks like it was detracked. They can just retrack it. Conduct some minor repairs on it. You can retract tanks in the field. There is a way to do it. And now they have a T-64 they can use. And as we continue along this line, now we have figured that this is located somewhere in the vicinity of Popasna, specifically because this is the same Russian news crew that was with the artillery battery yesterday. And this is them probably firing along this Bakhmut Lysychansk highway again. But we do know that the counter battery radars that have been provided by Western countries, including the United States, are indeed working, and you're about to see why. So this is them. They're conducting an interview. They're right here alongside these artillery batteries, and they are next to a TOS-1, which is completing its first salvo. And you'll see just how quickly this thing turns on its head.
Тяжелая огнеметная система. Даже с активными наушниками это очень громко. Я не представляю, что происходит в месте, куда эти ракеты попадают. Ну, помимо разрушительного этого термобарического эффекта, это стопроцентная деморализующая, очень мощная такая история. Поэтому вот такое сочетание пряника в виде информационной работы при помощи громкоговорителей и вот такого страшного кнута, о котором только если слышать. Так, прилет. Я так понимаю, позиции засекли, скорее всего. Вот поднимается дым. Подвал! Машина отрабатывает.
Собираемся.
Да, только что украинская артиллерия отработала в наш район. Ну, Этого следовало ожидать, потому что ТОС это артиллерийская система ближнего боя, можно так сказать. Бьет жестко, но недалеко. Поэтому быстренько грузимся и уходим. И уходим. Быстро, быстро, быстро!
So as you can see there, you can hear the more counter battery artillery coming in. Now, you may have noticed that only one round actually landed near them, and it was off. Now, the way artillery works, it's not precision, right? It's called indirect fire, which means that you're putting large shells in the general vicinity of your enemy. But it can be rather accurate, and while that shot was not, that's probably because they're doing a one and adjust mission. And if you can hear in the background, you hear multiple what sounds like explosions in the distance. That's actually counter battery artillery firing. Then you could hear it before the first round even landed, if you're listening. Now, there are different types of fire missions, and one of them is called a fire and adjust. And what that is you ask for one round, you put a round on target, and the forward observer or the radar station will give you adjustments for your fire. After that, what ends up happening is they will fire another round that will land, and they will give further adjustments. Normally, you can actually get on target within about 2 rounds with a well-trained crew. And that is something that every kind of mortar and artillery team actually trains to do. It's actually a lot of math. It's really cool to see them do it, FDC teams. In my company, we had an 81mm mortar platoon that I got to learn a little bit about because I had some friends in it, so that was really cool. But after you get on target, you conduct what's called a fire for effect mission, and that's where they load up all of the guns that they have on the gun line. You're on target. They give all of the guns the proper corrections that they need, their direction and deflection, and then they say, okay, we're going to fire 4 rounds from every battery. You have 4 rounds, 3 guns, or 4 rounds, 4 guns. And every single one of those 4 guns is going to fire 4 rounds on that target. And that is likely what's happening here. The radar is giving them corrections. They fire a round. They saw where it landed on the radar with this counter battery radar. And they said, okay, you need to adjust 100 meters, 100 meters, this direction. And you need to do 50 up or whatever. If you're coming from like a forward observer standpoint, they're probably giving them actual like mil-dot corrections here, but that's kind of the method to the madness here. So while the first round may not be accurate, the follow-ons are definitely going to be. So it only gets more accurate the more times you shoot. So that's kind of the game plan here, and that's why those counter battery artillery radars are there, because as soon as the Russians fire their artillery, you know where they're at. You can just put another round right on top of them and take out those Russian forces before they have time to fire and adjust on your position. And as you saw, the TOS-1 just started unloading in that general direction as a result, and then started moving. As we jump down here into Donetsk, we can see, well, another ammo depot has been destroyed. This one is in the Budanovsky district of the city of Donetsk here. This is the occupied city of Donetsk. And the cook-off is still reportedly ongoing. So this happened about 9 hours ago. Take a look here.
Я вижу пожар на Арктике 49 или какой вот. Понял, спасибо. Я вижу пожар на Арктике 49 или какой вот.
So I want to make a little bit of an observation here. So you know that Ukrainian artillery, whatever, had to hit this. But much unlike the Russians, that car alarm's not going off. It's not damaged. These trees aren't splintered. There's people going about their day. All of these buildings are relatively intact and aren't completely destroyed. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about when I mean there's a right way to do artillery inside of an urban setting. You can do it. You can be very smart and do it in the right way and cause minimal civilian casualties. The US has done it. Ukraine is doing it. Many other countries have done it. France has done it in Mali. But what does Russia do? They level the city because it's easier for them. You don't have to clear a house if there's not a house anymore. Russian mentality in a nutshell. And they're also apparently getting ready to film the next Mad Max movie in Russia. So Russian troops have lost a massive amount of equipment. That is completely understood. We've hit on that and we beat that horse dead. But the thing that they've lost a lot of specifically that hurts the most is logistical vehicles. Russia didn't have enough logistical vehicles actively in service to even begin with in this war. When they had 15 battalion tactical groups, they could only really supply about 10 of them, realistically. And we've seen a lot of logistical vehicles being either captured or destroyed, running out of supplies, running out of fuel en route while they're trying to get supplies to the front lines. Russia has always had an issue with logistically supplying its forces. You saw it during World War I. It was one of the faults of World War I that caused them to capitulate. It's one of the issues that you saw during World War II that was fixed when the Lend-Lease agreement occurred and the United States started supplying Russia with trucks. It's the same thing you saw during the war in Georgia. It's the same thing you saw during the Sino-Russian War, the first and second one. It's one that you've seen, like I said, in Georgia, most recently in 2008, and it's one that you see here. The logistics are the issue. You cannot, your army runs on its stomach. It's very famous words said by Napoleon. And an army, that is very true. An army does run on its stomach. So if you can't feed your troops, so that way they're not starving in the field, so that raises morale so they don't desert. It also helps if you give them ammunition. Your tanks have to run on fuel and oil, and you also need spare parts in case things break down because it's military grade and it certainly will break. And then you also need to make sure that you're supplying them with, bandages, medical supplies in general, because if they're wounded and then they die because they don't have medical supplies, then it doesn't do you any good. And then there's, like I said, spare stuff. I mean, spare guns, spare parts, spare body armor, spare everything. You need to carry redundancies. Russia can't do this. And so they've started pulling trucks out of storage, just like they've been pulling tanks out of storage. They're pulling out like Kamaz trucks out of storage. And they are Mad Max welding armor onto them, just like an ISIS fighter does when he gets a hold of a Toyota Hilux. I kid you not, we've seen it before, I believe yesterday, when we saw Fort Donbass for Mariupol, and we see that here yet again today. It looks like a Mad Max movie. It is wild. And you can see, these things are coming straight out of the storage yard. First of all, these are not Urals, these are Kamaz trucks, and these have started to become phased out. Secondly, just look at the cover on the back of this thing, and look how the side is just completely rusted out near the fuel tanks. And I'm just going to show you the video. It's a lot more hilarious that way. Seriously. Also, I want to point out, this is the only truck in this convoy. Like, there's no protection. There's no one guarding it. If these guys were partisans, they could take this truck out, no problem. but it's like a Mad Max movie. It's insane. And I'm not saying that there isn't like field art or anything, because everyone has some kind of like cool insignias painted on their stuff, because it looks cool. I mean, why wouldn't you? It's kind of a little bit of a morale booster. But that's a very crudely painted Mad Max style. I took a bunch of sheet metal and welded it to the front of my truck. I got the most artistic guy in my unit and painted our cool, awesome logo on the side, so we can identify ourselves, and also, it looks cool. So, as we drop down here to Mariupol, the horrors continue, and according to Petro Andrushenko, who's the advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, the Ukrainian mayor of Mariupol, there is an occupational government right there right now. He said that 6 dead bodies of civilians have been found under the rubble of a destroyed residential building by Russian occupiers in Mariupol. Unsurprising? No. There is estimated over 20,000 civilian casualties in the city of Mariupol, which is a city only in name because it's been pounded into dust by Russian artillery. So this is not the first, nor will it be the last time that we hear of bodies that are buried and decomposing underneath rubble of their own homes, because they were hiding in the basement and it all collapsed on top of them. So the horrors just continue. Every day is just a horror. There's lines for food because the Red Cross has been finally allowed into Mariupol to a limited extent. They have these big jumbotrons on the back of trucks showing Russian news media and war propaganda. Just for the theater, they had a crew out of Moscow come down because they didn't want civilians, who they've conscripted the male civilians to clean up the rubble. They didn't want them touching this because they knew that there were likely going to be a lot of casualties underneath it, and there likely are. There's estimated 600 of them that have been buried underneath there since it was hit. So Mariupol's just terrible. It's just a war crime in and of itself, but it's just an absolute tragedy. There's no really other good words to describe it. As we come up here over in the Zaporizhzhia Oblast, we saw that a BMP-3 was effectively destroyed. There's not very much left of it, but yet another BMP-3 officially taken out by Ukrainian forces here near the front lines in Zaporizhzhia.
Противогаз, перчаточки, номер 267, дверца, котелок.
So, pretty simple. I mean, the armor on a BMP is not very thick. It's only like 25 millimeters at most. I mean, and that's including the slope. Like, that's including a slope angle, which gets included in your armor when it's put together and designed. So they're very thin. They're essentially paper thin. So when you have like an anti-tank guided missile, like a Stugna or a TOW or a Mentis or Metis or any of them, pick and choose whichever one you want, or a rocket, go through this thing. Because your basic infantry carried like RPG-26 or an AT-4 are going to go through this thing like it's butter. And they burn out very quickly. They are not made to withstand that. But wait, what's this? And over in Polei, yet another ammunition depot is destroyed. And this one causes yet another sympathetic detonation of all of the ammunition. So, part of your logistics is you have to set up ammo depots. Some of them you have to put closer to the front lines than others. That way your troops just have readily available ammo. Those are a little bit more at risk. But this, you also have to take measures to make sure that this stuff is at least, the risk is mitigated. And they can't. When you destroy this much ammunition in just one place, all that leaves is these guys on the front lines have whatever they took with them, because it's going to be a while before you get any more. So I really hope you don't get into any prolonged engagements in the near future. Otherwise, you're going to get steamrolled. Once again, logistics for everything, because if Ukraine can supply their guys with the ammo, they can keep shooting. The Russians can't. And the Russians are already having logistics issues. So every time you see an ammo depot cook off, it's not good. It's only increasingly worse for the Russians. So, we'll take a look at this.
Пиздуют, пидорасов, пиздуют.
And as you can tell, I mean, some of those aren't small shells going off. That's like mortar rounds, some rockets. You also have like your little, 7.62 by 3.9, your 5.54 in there. But I mean, you got everything from, small arms to rockets and mortars and artillery cooking off in there. That really puts a damper on your military operations in this area. So I don't expect the Russians to be making any meaningful gains in this area anytime soon. Not that they really have in the first place. But actually, that wraps up everything inside of Ukraine. I mean, that's it for the day when it comes to Ukraine. There's some developments, especially with SEVERODONETSK. It's a really big day because it was day 100 of the war. We've made it over 3 months. We made it within the first 100 days. We're now rolling into day 101. And the Ukrainian army is not seeming like it's going to be folding anytime soon. This is going to become, once again, it's going to become a very prolonged conflict, more than likely. There's a 1-to-1 power parity when it comes to the front lines and military strengths, which is not great for the invaders, but it also puts you at kind of a stalemate. But that is shifting into Ukraine's favor as more and more heavy equipment and supplies come in from Western countries. So that's kind of the situation ongoing in Ukraine. Once we get more information to back up the claims in SEVERODONETSK, we will be adjusting the map, but only once we get enough credible information regarding that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to the international news. Nothing out of Moscow today. Really, just a lot of people speculating as to Putin's health and why we haven't seen Putin in a while. The U.S. intelligence reports and stuff like that. Listen, they also said he was going to declare full mobilization, and we believed him. I'm not making the same mistake twice. So no one really knows. I mean, he's stuck in his bunker. He's isolated. He doesn't meet really much with foreign officials. He's really cut off from his own government. He's may have survived an assassination attempt, which is one of the reasons for his isolations. That's what U.S. intelligence reports are saying. A random FSB agent who remained anonymous for obvious reasons stated that he went to get emergency treatment for cancer and that he has 3 years to live, though I don't know if any random FSB agent would just know that. So there's really anything. It could be anything. I mean, for all we know, he could be dead in his bunker right now, and we just wouldn't know it. They'd just be pumping out green screen footage for the next 6 months. Or he's alive, well, relatively healthy. He's just getting a little bit older, which we already knew, just because he's, in his 70s now? Yeah, I mean, that could just be it. I mean, and it could be anything in between. He could be just going absolutely psychotic and getting ready to launch nuclear weapons. We wouldn't know it. That's just kind of the situation with Russia. We just don't know. But as we move over here into Europe, we've already talked about the sanctions, so we're not really going to hit on that again. They announced their 6th round of sanctions. Everyone's for it. Yay. We hit on that a couple days ago. But unfortunately, down here in Germany, a train did derail near Burgrain. And what this has done is it's ended up killing 4 people, injured about 30, 15 of whom had serious injuries and were taken to the hospital. So it doesn't seem like there's any audio with this footage, but as you can see, it's a passenger train derailment. This part of the world, if you're from like the United States, a lot of other countries have a lot more public transit infrastructure, a lot more like passenger trains and metros and buses and all sorts of stuff like that than, say, the United States does. So that's why you're going to see just absolutely packed passenger trains like this. And so it looks like multiple cars did derail. I mean, that ain't good. But once again, 4 people were unfortunately killed in the accident and another 30 injured, 15 of whom are serious. And with that, it brings us down into the Middle East. And there's a couple of different developments. First of all, the Islamic State actually opened fire on a Syrian National Army bus here near Aleppo. This right here is Route 4, which is what they would call the Aleppo Deir ez-Zor Road or Deir ez-Zor Highway, because it runs all the way from Aleppo all the way through along the middle of the Euphrates River Valley and actually runs over here and through Deir ez-Zor and continues on all the way to Iraq, which is here at Al-Qaim. So that's where this is taking place, just outside the city. The Islamic State ended up killing 3 soldiers in the ambush, and they injured an additional 21, which included several civilians. So they didn't completely destroy the bus, but of course it's the Islamic State. They really did a number on it, obviously. We just don't have any more information other than that's coming from a Syrian National Army intelligence official. But the Islamic State is very active inside of Syria. It's really while they may not hold a caliphate, their strengths in Syria, they might as well. The Islamic State, while we did officially destroy them and holding territory, is still extremely active, extremely dangerous, and the security situation inside of Syria allows them to still prosper as a terrorist organization just because of the availability of supplies, of extremist fighters, and of potential targets against multiple nations, including Syria itself. They'll attack the Kurds, they'll attack the United States, they'll attack the Russians, they'll attack the Syrians, they'll attack literally anybody, the Turks, doesn't matter. They're the Islamic State, they're an extremist terrorist group. That's really all that you can say about it. As you jump up here to Mosul, a little bit of a quick note here. There was an agricultural fire near Mosul. It broke out yesterday in the south side of the city. We do not have any further information on it. We don't know if the Islamic State said it like they did over by Erbil and Kirkuk, but it's a possibility. But this is not good when it comes to Iraq. Iraq is suffering from a very severe drought, and on top of that, the war in Ukraine has really hampered. The UN is just saying it's going to cause mass famine. The ports being blockaded in Ukraine, and all of that Ukrainian grain that is in storage or is getting stolen by Russia right now is all like that would have all gone to the international market. It would have also gone to humanitarian aid, which is heavily reliant on Ukrainian grain because Ukraine is the breadbasket of Europe. And that means that they can't just import more grain here. What grain they do have is either catching fire by natural causes or is being set fire to by the Islamic State and other militant groups. And they're in the middle of a drought, so that they don't know if they're going to be able to grow another harvest of this. So this is going to cause very massive famine issues within this region. So you jump up here to Armenia real quick. 35 Armenian protesters were injured after The police started to use stun grenades and have really started to ramp up their tactics amongst trying to put down these protests. And this is the official number coming from the Armenian Ministry of Health. It's very possible more people were injured, considering the two parties aren't exactly getting along right now. But that is currently the ongoing situation. We'll take a look. I don't know if you noticed, but there was one guy laying in the ground in the middle after police officer just started beating the absolute hell out of him. And this police officer ended up getting pulled away. But, yeah, and they just drug him off by his shirt collar. Now, what people don't realize is that flashbangs are dangerous. Are they non-lethal? Yes, they are non-lethal, but they are still dangerous. They still can injure people. I mean, it is still a type of grenade that is going off. Now, I have some extensive use of flashbangs. I was at the 2020 Baghdad embassy protests, and what ended up happening is we used a extremely large amount of non-lethal, and that included, CS gas, that included, which is tear gas is what it is, and we used, flashbangs, specifically the 9-bangs. We used, those rubber pellets, beanbag rounds out of shotguns, foam rounds, all sorts of stuff. So they're still dangerous, but when you're throwing them in amongst the crowds, you don't aim for crowds of people. But these guys, they're literally just shooting them into the crowds with a 203 or a 320 grenade launcher. So that's just the situation there in Armenia. That situation's been developing for some time now, and that's just kind of the unfortunate thing happening. So as we jump back down here into Iraq, there's a rather unsuccessful terror attack here in Basra, right here near the Kuwaiti border. And the reason being is there's a video of this, and they attempted a terror attack against a police officer from the Iraqi Interior Ministry, which means he's a federal police officer. They threw a grenade at his house. It bounced off the fence and then fell right there in front of the both of them, and it exploded. One was injured, and one later died. So, let's take a look. Yeah, that's a fail. That's a really, really big fail on the part of a terrorist. You're not supposed to have your own hand grenade roll back and blow up in your face. But, once again, it was a failed terror attack, so I'm not too worried about it. we have no more further developments once we get further east, so we're going to go ahead and jump down here into Africa. And the first thing we have is in the lower Jabu region, or Juba region, I'm sorry. When a counterterrorism operation by the Somali armed forces ended up killing 10 militants of the group of Al-Shabaab, which is essentially Somalia's version of Al-Qaeda. They are an Al-Qaeda affiliated organization, and they have been trying to conduct terror attacks and kill off like the chief of police of Mogadishu, different members of parliament, different high-level members of the Somali armed forces. About 10 attacks so far in total is what these guys were allegedly involved in. They ended up seizing all sorts of weapons and equipment at the scene of the fighting. We can take a look here. So, it looks like we got, it looks like a PKP and a couple of AK, I'm going to say 74s, judging by the folding stocks, but I could be wrong. Could be AKMs with a folding stock. Just depends on, I'm not taking too close of a look at them. But that is currently the ongoing situation in Somalia. They do have, the Al-Shabaab is rather powerful. They actually overran an entire base of Burundi military forces that were operating as trying to assist Somalia with better securing their country. Somalia has always been in a little bit of turmoil. They've gone through periods of warlords. They've had their government, which everyone talks about. You know, Somalia is the only country that really doesn't have a government. They're trying to fix that, but it's not going so well. And in Nigeria, 2 were killed in the Kogi province when in a terror attack when an IED went off by unidentified persons. So we do not know who conducted this attack. We do know that the Islamic State is operating heavily inside of Nigeria, but there's also other organizations as well. There's other terror groups and other rebel organizations that are operating within a lot of these countries. So no one has yet taken responsibility for that attack. And as we jump over to Mali, the security situation is severely deteriorating. So immediately after withdrawal of foreign forces there in Mali, what has essentially happened is the National Movement for the Liberation of the Azawad militias began to mobilize their forces, and they would like to split the country in two. And this is coming as the military junta is getting ready to essentially face off against them. And the Islamic State, on top of that, is capitalizing on the entire thing. So they're getting ready to. So they are starting to conduct offensive operations against both parties, also including the Azawad militias and their population, because they're essentially exterminating them. So that is what the Islamic State is doing. They're essentially committing genocide against the Azawads. So that's kind of what's happening inside of Mali right now. I mean, this group's trying to claim independence and split the country in two, similar to North and South Sudan. So that is kind of where they're wanting to put it. Azawad and then Mali there. So we can take a look at some of this. So, obviously, there's a lot of stuff getting ready to go down in Mali. While the Islamic State has already started their operations, obviously the Azawad have not. And so there's about to be a very big relatively big war between the Azawad and the Mali junta. And finally, that brings us over to the good news. And there's a couple of different interesting developments. The first one, though, is weirder than the second, and that's because a company called 3D Biotherapeutics transplanted an ear from that is made. It's 3D printed from the woman's own cells. So the ear will continue to regenerate cartilage on its own. And so the cells within that 3D printing are responsible for the formation of those cartilage. It's not like an addition to it. So they literally took tissue samples from her. They applied multiple of these. They grew her own cells, and then they used that to 3D print her a ear in 10 minutes. And that was transplanted onto her the very next day. You want to talk about an amazing thing when it comes to your like health and wellness and the advancement of medicine. This is a huge. I mean, if you can do this with, say, an ear, what else can you do this with? What other people are going to, what other transplants could you do with this? Especially considering this procedure was effective. Now, a lot of that is going to be questions for further down the road, because a lot of parts of your body are much more complicated than the cartilage of your ear. But it starts to open the door to this, and that brings in a lot of questions. Exactly how far can you push this? And especially, it took 10 minutes for an entire ear. 10 minutes. Whereas for someone else, that would take months and months and months of being on a waiting list if you even got it. If you were to wait for a normal organ donation. So, pretty crazy indeed. And of course, as we jump down here, the Oak Ridge supercomputer is breaking records. It's the world's fastest supercomputer. It conducted more than a quintillion calculations per second. That is insane. That's 1.1 quintillion operations per second. You want to talk? This is a supercomputer. This is the future of like all technology at some point. This stuff is pretty massive, though. But it took about 3 years of development, and this is from Frontier, and they are saying they're going to be beginning to use this. They're going to actually start using this supercomputer by the end of 2022, so the end of this year. And so they're going to be looking to continue to build upon this, to see, push just how far it can go. But also, this is going to be used to simulate how stars explode, to calculate the properties of subatomic particles, investigate new energy sources like different types of nuclear fission, harness artificial intelligence, improve diagnosis of prevention of diseases. Once you can do calculations on this level, the possibilities are really endless. And so we're going to have to see just how far that goes. But it beat out the previous record holder, which is the supercomputer Fugaku in the Riken Center of Computation Science in Kobe, Japan. So, pretty cool indeed. And we can take a look here. It is a supercomputer, much like the original computers. They are the size of a room, but that's impressive. And so, next thing on the list is probably things like quantum mechanics. Like, you're going to have to start getting into things that are, quantum-sized, mechanics into this. And I'm sure this probably has some of that, too, as it's already been developed. It's just in very limited use, and it's hasn't been fully researched yet. But very cool. Of course, we're getting that from Live Science. But those two developments right there are going to have a very substantial impact. Not immediately, but as we continue on through the years, things like this are going to change how our world is developed. Because much like those giant computers that they had in the early 40s, that stuff shrunk down to where it now sits in your very own lap and in your pocket because of your cell phone. So it takes time, but stuff is going to get smaller. At some point, we're going to have home computers that can do 1.1 quintillion computations. And people are going to be able to get their lives back with 3D printed, their organ donors may be able to get hearts, transplant hearts by getting them from their own cells and getting them 3D printed. I mean, that's crazy. You can save lots of lives. So while in the early stages now, that is going to have major repercussions in the ongoing future. I hope that you guys found that the news today was very knowledgeable. I hope that I described some things and kind of went through some stuff a little bit more in depth for you, to talk about kind of, why is this happening? Why does Ukrainian artillery not seem very effective? Why are people getting injured with flashbangs, that kind of stuff. I want to be able to put a lot of stuff into perspective just from my prior experiences. And just kind of my knowledge, because I have a wealth of knowledge that's just not useful for anything else, especially not my job. So, sorry. So I misstated the news source for that article. By the way, it's I'm going to go back here. It's sciencenews.org, not Live Science. I apologize. So we are correcting that right here, right now. But yes. So I hope that I was able to describe to you kind of what's going on in the world and put some, a little bit more detail and understanding into this. I know especially when you're talking about warfare, a lot of people have some expectations of what it's like, and those expectations aren't reality. And also there's a lot of people that don't understand how wars are actually fought. And that is, how they're fought makes or breaks everything. So I hope that I can shed some light on that. But other than that, I just hope in general you enjoyed and that you find it knowledgeable. Congratulations once again for making it to the weekend. You made it through yet another week, and we are able, hopefully you're able to rest, and I hope that you have the weekend off. For those that may be in school or may have been in school, I'll know a lot of you are getting ready to go on summer break, so I really hope that you guys are enjoying that. If you're in college, I hope you're getting ready to go home to your families and spend time with family and friends. And if not, I hope that you guys are just enjoying your time off. Happy Pride Month for those of the LGBTQ community. So congratulations for that. I hope that you guys are really enjoying that. I hope the parades are wonderful. I hope there's I really hope there's not a whole bunch of hate cases or anything. I hate seeing that every year. But, and I hope that a whole bunch of companies don't take advantage of the situation to sell more products. That's also kind of not my cup of tea. But other than that, I hope you guys had a great day, and I hope that you guys will be joining us tomorrow. Please, in the description below, check out the different fundraiser and donation links that we have, and that you guys are going to be able to go and actually help with some of the topics that we talk about here today, whether that's the war in Ukraine or what's going on in Ethiopia and Somalia, especially when it comes to the drought that they're going through, or whether that's talking about Southeast Asia. If you have any other fundraiser links and organizations, please send them to us. We have some still in the vetting process. They're a little bit difficult right now, just because there's not a whole lot of information on them independently. But we are still going through and still attempting to vet them to make sure they meet our standards. But if you have any more, especially with places that we may not have listed, Brazil, Mexico, South Africa, we would love to take a look at those. So join us on the Discord. The description, or that's also in the description, the link for that. And you can let any staff member know, and we'll be happy to take a look and start getting that through the process. Same goes with news sources. But if you can't give a lot, give a little. And if you can't give anything at all to these fundraisers, please give us a like and subscribe. The more people that come here, they get to, get the daily news from an independent source, but also we are able to do good, and we can only do better with more people in our community, more people to help the people throughout the world. So I appreciate the support you've already given us. Please give a big thanks to the rest of the staff team. I really just lend my voice. They're the ones that make the magic happen behind the scenes. So they're awesome. I could not work with a better group of individuals. So I really appreciate them as well. And once again, I hope you'll be joining us tomorrow. So enjoy your Saturday. We'll see you guys tomorrow night. And I hope you'll be back to join us for yet another 24 hours worth of news and day 101 in Ukraine. And with that, have a great night, guys. I'll talk to you guys later. My name is Paul from the New News. Have a wonderful night.